Spooky Tuesday.
The day he left me was the day that I died. But then I was reborn as a witch.
Hey guys, welcome back to Spooky Tuesday, a weekly podcast where we're breaking down all of our favorite slashers, thrillers, monster movies, and Black comedies on the new scariest day of the week. I'm Sydney Thompson.
I'm Monica Height.
And I'm Chelsea Duff.
And this week, this love week, it's the day after Valentine's Day when you're listening to this. Hope everybody got some nice smooches. And anybody that didn't get any smooches got to just be mad at all the people that did get smooches, because that's what I did.
Very important to be bitter. Yeah.
And if
I like to be bitter, okay? Let me be bitter.
well, if you didn't get a smooch and you want a smooch, here is one. There you go.
Ooh.
But if you didn't want it, then I'm sorry, and it wasn't for you.
Just ignore the smooch.
Only if you
didn't
wanted
want
it, you can
that one
accept it.
skipped right over
Yeah,
you.
it just went whoosh right over your head, so you're good. But yeah,
it was
love is
an air kiss, and you had to catch it.
yeah.
If you
You
consented.
know how that works.
Yeah.
The consensual air kiss. It's a common practice.
It's a
But
thing.
like the love
It's a
is in the
thing.
air still. I know that the holiday is over, but like My Bloody Valentine this week, the love continues in a more sinister way this week.
I don't know. I think it's a very incredible love movie, and that is The Love Witch.
What a film. And I'm just gonna do it now. I've had my screen dark the whole time, and I did my best to encapsulate the spirit of Elaine. And here I am.
In your Morticia wig.
In my
Gorgeous
Morticia
wig work.
And I tried to do the makeup, but like
No wonder you wanted to highlight my wigs over here.
Here's the thing. We at Spooky Tuesday love wigs. We
It's
love
wig content,
Love
baby.
wigs.
This is a wig podcast. I posted
I
that
am
one
holding-
TikTok with the Sydney wig, and somebody was like, "Where's the Monica wig?" And I was like, "Just wait, bestie."
Don't
Just
worry.
wait.
the Monica wig sucks.
I'm so sorry, but what do you want me to do? Buy a new wig just for
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay.
That or
Give me
scalp me.
$15
You
and
have
I will.
2 options.
Okay, I'll come to your house.
Monica, buy Chelsea a wig so it's the exact one that you want.
This is from my tits out Manny Halloween costume.
I
or
knew
birthday
it. I don't
party.
have
Yeah.
a little tiny mullet. I used
You
to
have had a mullet.
I've had a mullet and it was awesome and I miss it every day, but my best friend tells me I can never get it again. It's Alex. She's mean. But I'm just happy for this opportunity to wear my Morticia wig / my Cher wig. But I will say that I kind of look like scary.
Here's what you're serving. You're serving Trish. You know what I mean? When she gets all dressed up in the wig at the end.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah. That's exactly what I look like. I look like Trish, who's just like fucking desperate to look like Elaine in that moment. That is such a sad part of the movie. Ooh, this movie, okay. We have a lot of thoughts. We've done a lot of research. I wish I had done more. But I will say that I was sober watching this. I was told to be flavor blasted, and I didn't do that. And I still had an amazing time with a 2-hour long movie. That's
This movie
saying something for me.
Is really long. And we've watched a lot of 2-hour movies that didn't feel long, but this one does.
This was the
feel
longest
very-
2-hour movie by far. Yeah.
This is a very long 2 hours.
This movie
Yeah.
was maybe longer than Midsummer.
No.
I feel like it dragged, but it was like intentional dragging and like meandering as part
Yeah.
of the whole vibe. And also, though there are so many fucked up things with this movie, yeah, I get that. Aesthetically, I could live in this film my entire life. So I was not mad that it was 2 hours long for that in that regard. I was just like, this weird music, all this makeup. I read this one article that was like casting is one of the most incredible aspects of this film. And like, yeah, how they get all these people who look like they're from 1960. Cause like people kind of looked a little bit different back in 1960. These people looked like it. Like
the Hollywood
cop,
standard was different.
Griff.
Yeah. I mean, I assume people
Griff.
look how they've always looked, but like the beauty standards of who was highlighted and who was on screen and memorialized for later on.
I don't know. People could, I don't know, maybe like, you know, it's like how everyone used to be short and now sometimes people are tall. Could be like that. Faces looked. It's true. Bitches used to be all short all the time. Now we get some tall freaks. Some of the time it's great. We love them. I'm one of them. I'm tooting my own horn here. But bitches used to be tiny. That everybody used to have tiny fucking feet, you know? Maybe 50 years ago, people's faces looked different. And now, anyway, scientists will find out one day. I'm so sorry. So, Sydney, what's The Love Witch about for the fun people at home who might have not seen it?
Well, so if you haven't seen The Love Witch, it is about a modern day witch. We're going to use modern very loosely.
No, it is. And it's so weird is the thing.
I know it is, but it like isn't. It's like, it's incredible. But it's a modern day witch uses spells and magic to make men fall in love with her with deadly consequences.
That's
and honestly, good for her.
Oh man.
No, I agree. Here's the thing. I did get flavor blasted. And I watched this movie. I was absolutely overwhelmed on 14 different fronts. I texted like 6 different people to try and process this movie. And one of them was like, oh yeah, I have seen that and it's super problematic. And it sent me down this like long spiral. And then I rewatched it sober again a few days later. And so I'm still like process everything and reading all these different articles and like reading quotes from the director. And like my brain is just spinning. But I think ultimately my takeaway is kind of like, this is Danny at the end of Midsummer. You know what I mean? Like in Midsummer, you have this very vulnerable person who finds themselves like co-opted into a cult. And then at the end, it's this moment where she's in a cult, but she doesn't realize it yet. And she just is feeling like supported for the first time. And I think that's kind of where this movie starts like a year after that. And so I kind of think her situation is super fucked up and none of it is good.
Well, that's the thing. Well, okay, really quickly before I say my thought I was having, I think that Midsummer watched this movie because just like the whole Renaissance fair scene, which was the greatest moment of my life, like all of the problems aside, we leave them behind. We look at how it looks. And I texted Sydney and Chelsea and I was like, this is what Adam and I's marriage will be. We will stumble across a mime in the woods and the mime will be like, you want to have a Renaissance marriage? And we'll be like, yes. And that's how it'll finally happen after being together for nearly 8 years. A mime will make it happen. That's the only way. And I loved that mime.
Are you telling me and Chelsea that one of us needs to dress up
it's you, it's not me,
and have this elaborate wedding just like planned in a park one day, and that's gonna be how we get you and Adam married, so that way all your friends are there? We're gonna have to plan this.
If you do that shit, if you do what this director
the surprise wedding,
where she freaking painted all of the props herself and sewed all of the beautiful Renaissance clothing herself, and you set it up in the middle of the forest for me, and you show up in that fucking mime costume and you have the little mini mime head of your own head, of course I'll do whatever you say.
Okay, I just want to
it's on the record.
I will do that, but I'm a very bad at sewing and not.
She
a
doesn't know how
good
to mime.
paint. Oh, I can learn how to mime. I'll go
I
take
have
miming.
no doubts that Sydney can learn how to mime. You have that in you, babe.
Okay, I'll just have Alex sew all the things. And who do we know that's a good painter? We got to know somebody.
It's too bad that I can't be a part of it because I'm okay at painting, especially painting suns. I've done that a lot because I like sun and moon imagery. Little fun
just
fact
do
about
a
me.
lot of. Here's the thing: we'll just do a lot of like, hey, Monica, you want to like be
Oh my God,
drunk in your
Monica,
backyard?
let's do arts and
painting?
crafts.
Monica,
it's
do you want
just
to paint a
us.
mural of the sun?
And it's just
You would
us
say
gathering
yes.
your own
Yes.
wedding stuff. But we're like, this definitely isn't for your Renaissance Fair themed surprise wedding.
Okay, I'll just forget this whole conversation ever happened.
You will forget this whole conversation ever happened.
I remember things that happen. I don't remember movies, so maybe
And
I'll
you're
be
never gonna
surprised by the
listen to
whole
podcast
concept. 'cause
episode, so it's fine.
That's true. I listen one time to find video clips, but I don't listen to the whole thing. Anyway, what I was going to say before that was that I feel like the whole premise of this movie is that like she's trying to be like this empowered woman because she is a powerful woman. Like she has magical powers, literally. But like she's been so like perverted by like the patriarchy, the men in her life, that like the power that she's trying to wield is actually like hurting her as well, or something like that. I mean, I'm trying to say smart things. It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard with this movie. The thing is that like I could have a takeaway from this movie that I don't know is necessarily the takeaway that I was meant to have from this movie. And reading a bunch of different interviews with the director slash customer slash blah 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 everything else, Anna Biller, confuses the issue for me, honestly, in a lot of ways, because she has talked a lot about how she finds slasher films to be incredibly misogynistic, and about how she thinks that the final girl trope is like the masculinization of women and is like stripping them of their femininity, and that is misogyny at play. And I don't think that I agree with that at all.
Yeah.
But also I don't think that it is like I don't know. She has these seem to me to be like contradictory quotes. Here, I'll find one that I saw on Twitter. Somebody like shared a screenshot of her and was like, why did you say this? And she didn't say, I didn't say that. So like, even though I've only seen the screenshot, not the tweet itself, what she said in it was that men who survive in slasher movies are typically men who are effeminate and wear dresses, and then people are trying to say like that's empowered. But then also she says, or the men who die are jerks and the men who live are gallant and bring flowers for the women every day. So it's like, are the men who live good, or are they effeminate and that's bad because it's disempowering to them because it strips them of their masculinity? Which is to say that masculinity is empowering for men and femininity is empowering for women, which it certainly can be, but she seems to hold them up as these like two opposite ideals that you can it can only be one or the other, which is what I struggle with, because I don't get that from this movie. This movie to me is very like toxic masculinity is hurting all of us and the patriarchy is hurting all of us.
Yeah. It's hurting men and women because like these men have feelings, and then like she does her witch magic on them to make them feel all these intense emotions, but then they can't withstand them and they literally die from them, which is like not good.
Okay. I want to talk about that actually. Do you think they literally die because they have feelings too big, or do you think that they have feelings that they are expressing because she's used magic to make them fall in love with her, and so now they're in love and they think they're with someone that they are safe with and they are expressing their emotions, and she goes, ew, I wish you'd die, in her head, and then they die?
could really go either way. I could
Because
see
I
it
really
both
think
ways.
it's ew. I think he would die. Like her expression, a lot of the times is so like,
Oh,
you
totally.
stop. And then the moment at the end with Trish, sorry to bounce around so much, but the moment at the end with Trish, when Trish runs out, she like grabs a charm and she literally is like crash, 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 die, die, die. I think she's doing that in her head the second that one of these men expresses an emotion and she goes, that's feminine, that's not masculine, that's not the masculine ideal I've been upholding as like the partner to the feminine ideal that I am trying to be. I wish that they would literally get away from me and die. And she doesn't say that because she doesn't want to actually kill anybody, I think, until like we see her be surprised at Wayne's death, and then do like a little mourning for him, but she also is so immediately disgusted the second that he isn't this like masculine ideal that she upheld him to be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like when what's the professor's name? Is
That's
that
Wayne.
Wayne.
That's
Yeah.
Wayne. So hot. Anyway. Wayne, he like immediately is like, oh my god, I need you, please be here. Elaine calls her name 1,000 million times, and she's literally like, oh my god, and just leaves the room and goes to like chain smoke downstairs. And like,
No, and she's like, what a pussy.
yeah, she literally says that. Well, does she kind of exactly says that. I don't know.
Yeah.
This movie, I feel like it has such a clear vision and a clear like visual aesthetic vision, but then the themes within it are so convoluted. And I mean there's something to be said just for that, because like that's life. Nothing is like cut and dry. There's problems with like different views of feminism. There's obviously problems with the patriarchy and all of that. And it's just like, I don't know if that's what she was trying to say also, that like there is no perfect answer or something, but if that's what it is, she doesn't make that clear either. I just was so ready for this to be like badass witch, and then she's like in her little tea party outfit and she's like, men are idiots, and I'm like, yeah. And then she's like, but the only way to control them is to crush yourself into a tiny mold of what a woman should be and let them fuck you whenever they want, and then you really have power. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I go ahead, Sydney.
So when that scene happens, we don't have a lot of context, like backstory for Elaine.
Yes.
It's not until later in the movie we realize like she is traumatized. Like
Yes.
we get a scene like her ex-husband was abusive, her father was abusive, and it just like emotionally abusive, all this stuff. You see Elaine, she is so well put together all the time. Hair always done, makeup always done, nothing out of place. And we see her like constantly like adjusting and doing things. So I think you see her like having to always constantly be this like ideal woman when like, and for her, I think that might be kind of like a coping mechanism for her and all of her trauma with her, like, you know, her husband and her father were like, what is going on? Like, you're ugly, you're all this stuff. And she just, I think, so desperately wants to be loved for who she actually is. But she's having to put on like this big lie, basically, of a facade. And this, like, this whole movie is female fantasy and male fantasy. Like, she is like forcing herself to be the like ideal male fantasy, which is being submissive, always doing this kind of stuff. But that's like not actually who she is. She's actually very assertive.
She's so dominant with Wayne.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, but she's like, oh, you have to be this, like, you have to give them what they want. You have to be this submissive thing. And that's not who she is.
Not at all.
She
From the
is-
get-go, she's like, why don't you take me to the mountain right now?
Yeah. Like, she is so assertive, like but for her to like kind of have to be like, oh no, you have to be submissive. You have to do like, I think that's also her like fantasy of, oh, I have to. And it's just, I think, a way for her to have control of the situation as well, too.
I can
I
see
hear
that.
you. But for me, that issue is so complicated by the fact that like these structures are not her own. This is not her idea of femininity. This is not her idea of beauty. This is not her idea of womanhood. Like she explicitly says, these ideas were all given to me by Barb and Gahan at the Coven. They taught all of this to me. I knew literally nothing before they gave me these instructions, and now I live by them. And I, it's interesting to me because to me, my read of the film is that Gahan is absolutely structured and paralleled as one of her abusers.
Oh, yeah, he's
Yeah.
100%.
No, she's scared of him the whole time. Like,
right. She's scared of
she
him.
recoils from him at every turn.
Right. But also she's like living her life according to the rules that he has given her. And then in an interview, I don't know, because for me, the thing is, it's really hard for me to justify the text of the film with what the director is saying is like her authorial intent, because she's saying like people are reacting negatively to Elaine because she's so feminine and so put together, and people just can't like get behind the idea that a woman wants to look this way and do this, but we don't know that that's what Elaine wants. That's what Gahan told her to do.
Yeah. Oh, it's this horrible scenario where it's like, do all of these things and then you have power. It's like they gave her a rule book and like, this is how you can have power as a woman, but like the rules are fake and it's all a trap to keep women trapped. Like that's what it feels like this magic cult was.
Which works for Gahan because then he gets to have all these ladies coming in,
and he gets
and all
to
of
fuck
these ladies
every
who
single
does
one of them.
Yes, he gets to kiss them on their womb, which first of all, stop.
Ew. I think he also kisses some titties at one point. No.
Oh, Hundy P. And then the first time he sees Elaine, he goes to kiss her on the mouth and she gives him the cheek.
Yeah. Go girl.
Yes, but
good
like
for
you.
He so clearly is like running the show, and I don't think that we ever really see her break free of that, which is like fine. You don't have that doesn't have to be the narrative of the movie, but it's so weird for me because the author is being like, this is an autobiography and she is so empowered and she is the feminine ideal, and it's just like, but is she? Because this is this man's idea of the feminine ideal.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many aspects of her life where she does like seem like she has her own all this power. Like she's running her witch business, it's going very well. She like is a young entrepreneur in that way, but it's just like, I don't know, she's just the magic that she was given, or not given, she earned it or whatever, however you want to say it, like it doesn't do what she wants it to do. It never can do what she wants it to do. And she's been told, I guess, that it will do this certain thing, but it can't, because like, there's this quote from this article that I really, really liked. Let me pull up what it is. It's anothergaze.com. Who wrote this? By Annette Lepique. Great name. And the quote that I want to pull out from that is this. They say, okay, this is the quote that I was paraphrasing earlier at the tea party with Trish. Elaine says, men are like children. They're very easy to please as long as we give them what they want. And Trish is horrified by Elaine's seemingly outmoded view of female submission. But Elaine's submission is self-interested. She only coddles a man, cooks for him, or has sex with him because she views those activities as stepping stones to reciprocity, a relationship where Elaine receives her partner's devotion and affection, coddled in turn. And so, like, she's like doing all of these things because she thinks the man is going to react in this certain way. And you see this specifically at the ending. We won't go fully into the ending, but she has these visions of all the men in her past being like, I love you, Elaine. You're amazing. You're so fantastic. She sees Wayne. She sees what's her husband's name?
Jerry.
Jerry. It was
Steve was a
Steve.
good guess though.
Could have been. I was just gonna say a man's name. She sees them all saying that they love her, and they're all like level-headed. They're not like psychotic like how they actually were when she'd done the love magic on them, where they were like, Elaine, I will die for you. Elaine, I'm gonna throw up because I wish that my wife was you, like that kind of stuff. They're like stars in their eyes, like, I love you, you're amazing. And like that's what she wants, and that's the outcome that she's looking for. But it always, like, again, this magic that she's using doesn't give you that. It can't give her that, and her tactics that she's using can't reach those ends no matter what. So she's in this like never ending cycle where she can never reach her goals. It's maddening. I don't know, this movie made me go insane.
Did y'all figure out like the between Richard, who is
Trisha's husband.
Trisha's
husband, and then Wayne, what they have in common?
They have
What they
dark
have in
hair.
common.
They live in the same town.
Well, yes, but
They were both
have,
talking to another woman initially.
well, sure, but they both kind of like they wanted to be kind of playboys. Like Wayne literally called himself a
Libertine.
a libertine, and
Which I googled, by the way, if you'd like.
I had
the
to Google too.
definition.
But yes, tell our listeners if they also were like, what is a libertine?
Yeah, there were two definitions, and I'm going to give you the first because it jives with his quote on the subject, which is a person, especially a man, who behaves without moral principles or a sense of responsibility, especially in sexual matters. The other one is a person who rejects accepted opinions in matters of religion, a free thinker, and I'm sure he considers himself both. But what he says is, I love women. Does that bother you? So I take it to mean that he is a libertine in the fucks around a lot kind of way.
But then we see,
Fancy way of saying fuck boy.
you know, Robert is married and he's talking about like, oh, I wish I had more affairs. I wish I had all these kind of things. So she's finding these two men who are like, oh no, I want all of this, like, I have all these women. I want all these women. And then after they're with her, they like only want her. And TBH, isn't that something that like a lot of women do where they like find a man and they're like, I could fix him. I could make this like this like fuck boy be like only want me. Like, isn't that a fantasy? Like, isn't that like an ultimate like
to change
fantasy?
the bad boy? Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess though my question is also Wayne is different because he's confirmed a little slut within the text, and everybody is like, he sleeps around a lot, he takes a lot of dates to his cabins, he loves to do drugs and have sex, etc. And he himself says,
What a
like, I
guy.
love women. And then frankly, and he is such a piece of shit, although I have complicated feelings about all of this, but when he's in his emotional rant saying the deepest feelings in his heart, what his deepest feelings are: hot ladies be crazy and ugly ladies are smart, but they're ugly, which is so sad.
Oh God! When he was bearing his soul, and he just said the
when he's like,
stupidest shit
yes,
that I've
right?
ever heard. I was like,
But
"Oh, your
he's-
soul is dumb." That
First
sucks.
of all, I transcribed probably like 75% of this movie because I was like, I need to closely analyze this text. But that whole quote, I just want to give it to you for a second. She's like, what is it, Wayne? What is it, baby? And that way that she talks, and he goes, I feel so strange. She says, it's all right, you're with me. And he says, oh, Wayne, no woman has ever given herself like that to me before. he's no lady has ever fucked him in such a way without expectations. Like he's moved by it, which honestly would be touching, except she goes, life has been tough, huh? And he goes, yeah, in a way. You're not like any other woman I've met. No games, no agendas. You just seem to take life as it is. And she goes, is there any other way to take life?
He's a
And
bad reader of people. Anyway, continue.
I know. He goes, well, the women I've been with, they all want you to make a bunch of promises to them as soon as you sleep with them. But how can you commit to someone that you don't even know? It's crazy, which like is not a bad point. But then he says, I never thought I wanted to be tied down to anybody, but it's just because nobody was ever quite right. All the women that I'm attracted to physically, they're never bright. And all the bright ones are homely and don't arouse me. And she goes, that sounds like quite a problem. And he goes, it is. It is.
All the smart bitches are ugly. Oh no.
He was like, gone my whole life thinking I didn't need anyone, but now I'm not so sure. He's like, oh my gosh, you're hot and you've got a brain. You're the one. But it's just like, Wayne,
you acted that the exact same way that he did. So like, great job.
It was so perfect. It was such an incredible delivery.
Amazing.
But the thing is that Wayne, I have slightly less sympathy. He didn't deserve to die. I have slightly less sympathy for him, but it is not clear to me how much is the men acting on their own free will and how much is not. Like, it certainly seems that she says at one point when she's talking to Griff, because he is, quote, immune to love, so her powers don't work on him the same way. She certainly seems to be able to use like sex magic on him just fine. But the love magic part is not following in the way that she expects. But there are these moments where the camera makes it very clear that she has them like under her will or under her spell, if you will, where it cuts just to her eyes, like burning into them, kind of in the same way that Candyman used the shot on the eyes with like, it was different in Candyman, because in Candyman, when they showed somebody's eyes, it was to show that they were like under Candyman's spell. So their gaze was like kind of soft and unfocused. And there was like this highlight across them to have, the like nostalgic, like caught in a moment kind of thing. And she's just burning into you. And then there's like an immediate transformation after she burns you with her little laser eyes. And with Wayne, he kind of immediately, she puts out the feelers like who trying to fuck is honestly the feelers that she put out. If it's sex magic, am I wrong? And then Wayne is like, I'm trying to fuck, and he turns around and she's like lasers into him. He comes over and she's like, do you want to take me into the mountains and fuck me? And he's like, okay. And he has no further questions. So not to say that that's what happens, but like whatever. But Richard, he's just talking about how he loves his wife and how he wants to fly a plane. And then she lasers into him and he's like, I guess I'd fuck a lady. And it's like, okay, but how much of that is Richard on his, how much would Richard have done if she was not controlling him? You know what I mean? She says that you can only act on what's there, but is what's there sexual attraction to her? And she's like amplifying it to the fact that their horniness overtakes their rational brain? Or is she like stripping them of free will in some capacity? Because
I'm not sure.
It's not clear to me, and the lack of free will makes me very uncomfortable. Again, Wayne I feel less bad for, because that seems less like a lack of free will and more like he's just high as hell, which is, I don't want to say on him, but she hands him a drink and he goes, what's in it? And she goes, I made it. So he downs it in one gulp.
I would fucking never do that. If the hottest bitch I ever seen gave me a flask and was like, drink the whole thing right now, I'd be like, why aren't we sharing it? We want to be on the same wavelength here.
Here's the thing with Wayne, like, if this was a woman and you just saw a hot guy and he was like, do you have a secluded cabin in the woods that you want to go to right now with me? Like, what?
Right, which is part of my question. Like, I guess is it that Wayne as a person is such a dirty dog that he has no follow-up questions? Or is it that Wayne is generally a horny person, but her sex magic has him like it's her magic that is like overpowering any reason in his brain that would have him asking too many follow-up questions beyond what we see? Or is it just that as a man, he has never been socialized to see a member of the opposite sex as dangerous to them potentially?
I feel like it could go other ways. I like to read it as a less to use my favorite adjective, sorry, rapey way of magic, because that's what we're towing around here.
Yeah, I mean, it's either sexual assault or it's not.
Yeah, but I think that especially with, oh my god, it would be great if I remembered one name in my life. Richard.
Trish, Robert.
With Richard, like he gives her the eyes the first second that he sees her. So it's not like he's not attracted to her. It's clear that he is attracted to her. And also, I'm not saying that you can't hang out with your like friend's boyfriend or something like that. Like, Sydney, you got on a soup plantation with Adam. I didn't worry about it. But
Adam and I did have a very romantic date at the RIP soup plantation.
I know, and I understand, and it was very, and that's an erotic
Elaine,
place.
she would have loved soup plantation.
She would have. And here's the thing too, did we not also immediately send you the dumbest photo of me and Adam at soup plantation?
It was beautiful. It was beautiful. But, you know, going into it, you knew that you were probably going to you're going to fuck on the table of soup plantation. You two knew that going into it. And Richard and Elaine knew that too.
That was the plan. But unfortunately, there was too many families around.
Too many children. Yeah, that's the problem with soup plantation.
I've always said that about soup plantation.
But, like, I feel like she probably was like, Richard, I'm scared. Do you want to come over? And he was like, anything for you, Elaine. This is totally gonna be kosher. You waited to hang out with me the second that Trish is out of town. Like, you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying. It didn't come from nowhere. But I do just want to give a little shine to Richard because she's like, what turns you on, Richard? And he's like, one, no one's ever asked me before in my life. I'm so excited. And then he's like, it's planes. Baby, it's planes. I love to be in a plane and to fly the plane. And I was just like, oh my God, you fucking nerd. Good for you.
Also, one of my favorite things is when they're in the tea room at the beginning and Trish is like, oh, well, you know, I guess I have used sex to get some things that I want. And then like looks at her wedding ring. And I was just like, okay, Trish.
Also, like, can we just briefly talk about how Trish wants to fuck Elaine also? And it's obvious. And that was the answer to all of the problems was for them to fuck. And that was set up in the first minute. And then
she literally shows up and she's like, you're so pretty. I didn't mean anything by that, though. I'm married. And it's like, there's no other way to take that than gay.
Yeah, I mean, so like, it would have just been like, wow, you're so pretty. But then she was like, but I didn't mean anything by that. And then I'm like, oh, you're a homosexual woman. Like, that's what's happening right now.
The thing with Richard is I don't know that I got that it was like an eyes moment immediately the first time, because that's what Wikipedia said too. The Wikipedia summary says she decides that the next man she will try to seduce will be Richard, since he is married and cannot obsess over her, because like they had a moment of attraction the first time they laid eyes on each other, but those like discordant tones to me was very like alarm bells, warning signs, especially because Trish had just been saying like how her husband is great and doesn't uphold the patriarchy in their marriage. Like they literally are talking about patriarchy in this movie, right and left, which is why it's so complicated.
I think maybe why the alarm bell thing goes off is because like, oh, they're just saying, oh, he's so great, but then he's immediately making fuck me eyes at Elaine. So like, oh, he's not that great because he's automatically doing that, you know? I think that was the read. But I think they definitely had that attraction from the get.
I thought like he was gonna be evil the first time, frankly.
He just looks kind of evil.
He
He
does
does.
kind of
He's
just
got
look
that
He just
face.
evil.
looks kind of evil. He looks like a less angular version of that one Charlie's Angels villain who cuts
Oh,
off
the
everyone's
creepy man with
hair.
the
Thin Man.
hair.
Yeah,
Creepy thin
the
man.
creepy thin man. They could be cousins.
Chris. What's his name? Crispin
Crisper?
Glover.
Yeah.
Crispin Glovin. What is it?
Crispin.
Crispin. Somebody
Crispin?
Google. I'll Google. Crispin.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Crispin
so-
Glover.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great name, Crispin. Good for him.
And then the second image on was him with the hair.
Oh yeah.
Oh God.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
So also
We should
so
do that
problematic.
for this Tuesday.
So
oh,
many
yeah.
terrible racial jokes in that movie. So much cultural appropriation left and right. But also Lucy Liu is wearing leather. And so like, what are you gonna do?
Oh, I know. You're gonna watch it for the Lucy
You're
Liu and
gonna
leather.
watch it for Lucy Liu in leather. And then Drew Barrymore's like in her jumpsuit
Oh,
with her titties.
It's
God.
so hot. Oh my God.
Anyway, back to
Anyway,
this movie.
This movie also hot. But
This movie was a porn, except for apparently the director hates porn, so she doesn't
Yeah,
think that it's a porn.
I read this one interview with her. It was from on IndieWire, and I was like, I don't fucking know what is happening. Like, I just
Adam's also really upset by the article on IndieWire.
Adam's just like,
no.
how could she
was
not be chill with porn?
That was James, and I
Oh,
think he's
James.
reacting to the Olympics right now.
Mm,
So that was an Olympics reaction. Anyway, yeah, no. This interview, they were like at Tam O'Shanter's, which is a great place, and then she's just like, yeah, like I flirted with the idea of porn, but it's not, or something. I was like, I don't even know what she's trying to say. Like, all these quotes could mean like 5 different things.
Yeah, the thing in one of them that I read is that she was saying like she's anti-porn because so much of it is exploitative, and so it inherently can't be feminist if it's exploitative, which I agree with. But there seems to be no consideration for the nature of consensual sex work, or the nature of female-driven like sex work, or people who are doing solo sex work who like are, because okay, here's the thing. One of the articles I read, the tip-off that I got was that Anna Biller is transphobic and this movie is like very bioessentialist, which it is, in the sense that the whole thing is like women are powerful because of their wombs, and your magic comes from your wombs, and women womb, not a woman, no magic, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it essentially
could
is
see
like
that.
reducing people to their anatomy, and
the dichotomy that we were just talking about, like masculinity, femininity, there are 2 separate things.
the
and I
very
just-
rigid gender roles.
yeah, I hate that. It's just like everyone contains both. Like, come on.
Yes, and we all exist on a spectrum, which she did kind of say at one point in one quote. So it was, again, I was like, I'm not sure what her perspective is exactly. But I was sent one article from, what's the website? screamqueens.com. And again, every article we mention we'll put in our references if you want to read it in full. But this was an article written by a gender nonconforming person named Red, who was talking about like the bioessentialism and the transphobic dog whistles in this movie and how like fucked up it is. And then I read another article on Medium from a trans woman who had done sex work and was saying like they really liked this movie and they really can see themselves in this movie, and they can really see themselves in the very like purposeful presentation of Elaine and the way that she puts herself together, and the way that it is like holding up a mirror to what she thinks the world wants to see from her, in some ways. And also in some ways it is like very purposefully choosing your presentation. And also Elaine is not a sex worker. Like, she's doing burlesque. And a lot of these characters are doing burlesque. And so this writer was saying, I see myself in this film. I just think it is like such a shame that this film can't see itself in me. And that the author doesn't see space for me to exist in this film and to be part of this world. And so I think that's a really interesting perspective. But
Do
it's
you
just like,
think
again,
that-
so much of it is contradicting. Sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, like, because this movie was like also, you know, supposed to be set in the 60s, do you think it was
It's not.
also, but like the aesthetics and stuff, I know it's supposed to be like a modern day thing, but it was taking all of these like like influences from like
Mhm.
Hitchcock films, a lot from like the over like things of the 60s, like that could play in, because like back in the day, like you didn't see any, because like like one of my favorite things, it's like I know this is supposed to be is like set in modern day, but
Mhm.
everything is so not modern that when you see weird modern things like the weird RAV4 in the background, or the fact
When
that
Trish
she
whips out her
uses a
iPhone
cell
at the
phone,
Victorian
yeah, like,
Tea Palace.
right, so
Oh
like you're
my
just like,
god, that didn't even register for me.
And then at the end, they're like the DNA proof. What I was, like I said, I was flavor blasted the first time when I saw the iPhone. You don't see any like clear logos or anything, but I saw it and I was like, that was a cell phone. And then it got put away so fast that I was like, I will just have to check that later. And then at the end of the movie, they were like, the DNA proved, and I was like, the DNA. Okay, like that was
Well,
it for me.
I-
We're no
I
longer in
thought
the
too.
60s.
I thought too that it was fully in the 60s, because I was like, they got a fucking jar of her piss and her blood, and they haven't connected her definitively to the crime yet.
And they're just
And
like touching it with their whole ass hands, no gloves, just digging a body up themselves. Very good police work, which again flies when you're like, this is a movie that takes place in the 60s. And then they're like, smartphone, DNA, modern cars. Everybody just has a throwback aesthetic.
But you were saying, Sydney, you think like because it was trying to encapsulate that, it has some of those values. Is that what you're trying
yeah,
to say?
I think a little bit, like, because it was like the film was like taking, like, saying like it had something to say about old like Hollywood standards and societal standards in these like time periods where like Technicolor was bursting, and like all the aesthetics. I think that's one of the reasons maybe why it is so gender rigid, because it,
Yeah.
like, society did used to be that gender rigid, unfortunately.
But I don't think that I think it's holding up that aesthetic. And I think to a degree, it's holding up those gender roles as the ideal, though. You know what I mean? I don't think I think you're right that it is absolutely not an accident and they're tied together for that reason. But I don't, I kind of feel it's to say, like, look at this glorious era. Why can't we go back to this in a way? Which is kind of the sticking point for me, I guess.
Yeah, I
Because
can see that. I don't like that though.
I don't
don't know.
know.
I think a lot, but like I also like this movie is high camp. You know what I mean? Like it is like, and you can tell by the acting, which TBH, the acting I think is like supposed to be bad. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
Like,
It's
it's supposed
perfect
to
for
be
what it
like
is.
those movies. It's supposed
It's
to be like
exactly
those
right for
movies.
what it is.
yes.
It's
But so
supposed
like
to be
I
like
think like
those shitty 60 movies where there's a person never acted before, I guess, and they're like, "Oh no, Elaine!" Like that's the vibe. I don't know. It's super convoluted. Like the messages is so muddled, and there's this quote from the IndieWire article that was an interview with Anna, and this is a quote from her, and she said, maybe there is a little of that in the love witch, the sense that you take the woman, the objectified sex symbol, and you ask what's inside her mind. The queasy thing about it is how the left has appropriated that kind of free sexual politics in a way that's not really good for women. So that if you complain about some of the problems for women in the sexual revolution, you're looked at as a right-wing prude. The sexual revolution promised all kinds of freedom to women, and none of it was accomplished, at least not for women. So like, I don't know if that, I feel like that like opened my eyes a little bit to like her whole deal. Cause yeah, I guess that there's some truth to that, but also like using sexuality as power isn't bad, but I feel like the movie's kind of arguing that it is bad because it only brings her grief, you know what I mean? It only brings her pain. And it's just like, why did we have to make this so unclear? Like, you're not making any point because there's 20 points being made that are all like contradictory. I don't know.
Right, which would be totally fine if the movie was not trying to make any sort of moral statement or any sort of feminist statement or whatever it is.
But
But
so
I think
is.
it's yeah, I think that it is the thing. And she has such strong statements in interviews, and that's where I get really lost in that. I agree that I'm sure for many women, this like sexual revolution and feminism and whatever meant that they had just new different expectations instead of the freedom to actually do what they want. And I'm sure for many women in the free love era, not living by free love values or whatever, had them labeled as a prude and stigmatized because of that in some ways. But the whole thing to me, okay, so I was talking to a trans person and they sent me the transphobia stuff, but I had also picked up, but even before that, because that went entirely over my head, frankly. But I had picked up on this weird like trad wife vibe. Do you guys know the term trad wives?
I've heard that before, but I don't know what it means. Can you
No.
tell me?
Okay, it basically is like traditional wife, traditional wives,
Oh,
and the movement of being like, it is not feminist for a woman to have to go to work and blah blah blah. What is feminist is for a woman to embrace her femininity and her feminine role of being the mother and the housewife, which is kind of what this movie says at a lot of the times, of
yeah.
like breaking it down to like, the most feminist thing for women is to be feminine, and the most masculine thing for men is to be masculine. The most empowering thing for men is to be the height of masculine ideal, no feelings. And the most feminist thing is for a woman to be a servant to her man because nobody else can fulfill that role. And we should honor women for fulfilling that role. And that's where it's like, okay, like there's nothing wrong with being a housewife. Be a housewife if you want to be a housewife, but to say that actually the feminist choice now is to be a housewife because that is embracing feminism and that is embracing being feminine, is where it's like, well, but that has been the standard this whole time. That never stopped being the standard.
I will say,
issue.
though,
Oh, you go. Sorry.
sometimes I would just like to one, not be subservient to any man ever, but sometimes I would like to be like a stay-at-home daughter or something.
Who would
like
to have
that,
a wealthy benefactor? You know what I mean? May we all have wealthy benefactors.
I am just looking for a
but-
sponsor. Like I don't want to work, but I also don't want to be subservient to anybody.
Yeah.
Like I think people should just give me money when I'm having a bad day. You know,
I
like when I'm
agree with
having a
that
good
for
day,
you.
I want to work, I want to do my job, but sometimes I just have really bad days and I don't want to do anything. And I think I need $5,000 to make me feel better.
Somebody send
I want
Sydney
that for you.
$5,000 right now. Yeah.
Well, but okay, my issue is, and this is the issue with this could be said about so many different things. It's just like everyone is trying to create these golden fucking rules of what every type of person, thing, cat, dog, whatever the fuck, whatever the topic is, should be. And it's like, these are the rules that you have to follow to be the perfect feminist, to be the perfect woman, to be the perfect man, to be blah, 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 blah. It's just like everybody's gonna have their own fucking definition of what works for them. So like, let a person be a stay-at-home mom if they want to be a stay-at-home mom. Let a girl be a final girl and like have masculine traits or whatever, if that's how you want to say that. Like, let everyone just be however they want to be, unless they're hurting people. and
Give people
that's
agency
what,
in their own lives.
yeah, that's what like feminism should be. It's just like you having the freedom to express yourself as like, if we're talking about women, as a woman in whatever way you see that, you know, however that plays out for you. And it's just I don't know. The I can't figure out what her versions of the rules are, but they are ones I don't like. That's what I can tell.
Yeah, I just the dialogue is so blatant in the movie. Like in that first conversation with Trish, Elaine says, she says, if you want love, you have to give love. Giving men sex is a way of unlocking their love potential. Poor Richard, she says, like, if I gave Richard sex every time he wanted it, I'd be a wreck. And Elaine says, poor Richard, he loves you and he wants you and you torture him. You have to give a man his fantasy. But also, can we break down the fact that every man's fantasy, according to Elaine and according to therefore Barbara and Gahan, is like a mommy he can fuck? Sigmund Freud would love this movie.
Seriously.
I saw a TikTok the other day of like teenagers using the audio, and it's like, when a man is in love, he becomes a child, and when a woman is in love, she becomes a mother. And somebody was just like, what the fuck?
That's this movie though.
Yeah.
That is
She's
so
like, let me be your mommy
up.
who is sexually available to you on demand. And she kind of has this expectation that in return, the man will be the daddy and not the baby. But like, you can't be a mommy to your daddy. Like, you have to be, if you're going to be a mommy and a daddy together, now you guys are taking care of each other in equal ways and like sharing burdens and not being like, let me do literally everything for you and be your fantasy and bend to your every whim.
Well,
except for the
we
fact that
already
she knows
know
she's going to trap them under her will the second that she does it. She's like, I only have to bend to your whim this one time, and then in theory you're under my spell, you'll do whatever I want.
Yeah, I mean, well, we know that she has daddy issues because there's that audio flashback thing where like her Jerry, not Steve, I almost said Steve. Jerry, her husband, like is saying horrible, emotionally fucked up, abusive things to her.
Here's
and then there's also
so
her
annoying.
wait, let me finish. And her it also makes her, it also goes back to her dad saying similar stuff to her too. So like that kind of, you know.
Dad stuff is 1,000 times. I mean, not to minimize the Jerry stuff, but I'm looking at those quotes.
Oh no, the dad stuff is so bad. I blocked it out. I literally don't remember.
Yeah, Jerry is just like an absolute fucking bitch because he's like, I love you very much, but you need to be more careful. Dinner was late 3 times this week and the house is a total pigsty. But okay, here is the thing that he says after that, which makes me a little bit like, was Jerry wrong though? He says, do you know that I found an old hot dog under the bed this morning?
That was hilarious.
Oh, so funny.
If it's his hot dog,
it's his hot dog.
But if
it's his hot dog,
do we know that? I mean, I don't doubt it because he
seems like a hot dog kind of guy. Not that there's anything wrong with liking hot dogs. I love hot dogs.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he's like, I've been really patient up until now, but you need to step up your game. That's like, shut the fuck up, Jerry. But I found an old hot dog under the bed this morning. Honestly, just sends me.
It's beautiful.
I don't know. For me, Jerry was like, he was doing his own thing. There's also a mystery guy, Robert, who didn't make it into the cut of this movie. But when we're at the end and Trisha's like going through her dresser and finding all the love spells for everybody, there's a mysterious 4th portrait on her dresser. And then there's like a bundle in her drawer labeled Robert. God. So there's this. Was this going to be
Robert. A 3-hour-long movie?
I don't know. Like, did Robert get cut, or is Robert just like set dressing? I don't know. But so there's Jerry, who she was married to for 2 years. Yeah, her ex-husband she was married to for 2 years, and then he leaves her. And when he's about to marry somebody else, what did it say? He overdosed or something like that. And he'd never done drugs before. And then there's Wayne, who dies of heart failure because
He just
no
loves her
hot
too
women are
much.
smart. And
So sad.
so sad for him. And then Richard, who she says just like gets too obsessed with her, but there's so much of their relationship that happens off screen that's really interesting because we see her fuck him like just the one time. And he goes insane out of his mind where he's like, what are you doing to me, Elaine? And that's why I was like, is he okay?
Also just want to really quickly note that striptease that she did was incredible, and the feather boa sent me straight to heaven. So anyway, continue.
All of her lingerie, gorgeous, but she absolutely just repeated her routine that she did for Wayne. I would love to see her spice it up. Although
but
the
she
boa
added
was
the
fresh
boa.
and new. The boa was
Come
fresh and new.
on.
You're right.
Put some shine on the boa.
But there's like this whole implied relationship with Richard that happens off screen, not just because we see her tell Barb at the coven gathering for some solstice. I don't know, not a solstice. But some holiday, she's like, oh, he was just too obsessed with me. But when Trish is dressing up in all of Elaine's underwear and more to go through her dressing, underwear. She finds like a birthday card from Richard that has like a picture of them in there, and it says,
they
like,
got like
happy
portraits
birthday to
done.
my love. Yes, which is like insane.
Really quick, is that photo taken in front of John Marshall High School, which is the high school from Nightmare on Elm Street, because it looks a lot fucking like it. But anyway,
I don't know. I think they filmed mainly in Northern California. Yeah, Eureka was like a lot of where it was. And they filmed in like Berkeley and San Francisco too. But it could have been. I mean, who knows? Maybe they did like, oh wait, we need this photo.
They did just film fucking Yellow Jackets across the street from my house, and I didn't know, and I'm just not okay about that. They were right there. Anyway, continue.
You know what I had to say about that.
And it
was
upset.
A very funny joke that I made to you. But that's fine. But so then there's after Wayne, there's Richard, and then there's Griff. And here's the thing is that he is like actually the masculine ideal that she's been asking for this whole time, which means that he is incapable of loving her because the man that she wants is someone who has no feelings. And then he comes along and he says, I have no feelings. And she's like, actually, you're the worst of all. And I've snapped. Now I've snapped. Before it was murder on accident a little bit, on purpose, but on accident, sort of. Now she's ready to go full dagger to the heart.
Oh, yeah. I just think that like the thing is that she becomes their fantasy and then she expects them to become hers. And so then she realized that what's in her head. No, he doesn't. Griff?
Other than he doesn't love her.
With her. Well, no,
but she doesn't like that. The second that they're obsessed with her, she's like, ew.
No, I know, but she's trying to she wants them to just like love her and be like kind of normal. You know what I mean? Just like not be like,
she should have a better screening process than putting out her who wants to fuck aura and having every man in the vicinity turn their head their way and her saying, you'll do. Do you like nature? Do you like, she literally says to Griff, okay, here's the thing. She doesn't search Griff out on purpose. He comes to her because he is investigating Wayne's murder. And actually, I didn't notice this until I watched it the second time. She says
didn't use her magic, and that's why
she did use her magic
from the start. I mean, yeah, but that's not how they met. I don't know. Continue. Whatever.
She says, I know I've seen you before. I just don't know where. He says, I have that same feeling. And she says, I know you're the man in the cards. You're my fate. No, he's the cop that pulled her over in the beginning.
Yeah, he is.
Anyway, so he's in here like interrogating her basically and being like, are you a witch? And she's like, what? Just because I'm a witch that makes me capable of murder? You don't know what it's like to suffer. And then she does her laser beam eyes into him, and then he immediately goes, you can call me Griff. And there's not really the sound of a bell as his dimple flashes, but there might as well be.
That's true. Okay, you're right.
Yeah, she like fully lasers into him, and that's when he starts to be like, "Oh, like, do you want to go
What's
horseback riding?"
murder?
Because what she says to him, this is her screening process. To Wayne, she goes, "You seem like a man who likes nature. Is that true?" And he goes, "That is true. How could you tell? You know me so well. 2 seconds in, what a read!" And she's like, "Well, I'm good at reading people," except she's 100% not. And then to Griff, she says, "I did a Celtic cross reading for my future card. I got the Knight of Wands. I always felt that if that card showed up in a future reading, sorry, I don't know why I'm not doing my Elaine voice. I would soon meet the man that I'm going to marry." I'll slip into it now. "The man that I marry has to love animals. Do you like animals, Griff?" And he goes, "Why, yes, I love animals. In fact, a friend of mine has a couple of horses I'm very fond of. You know, tomorrow is my day off, and it's supposed to be quite nice out. Maybe I'll get away from the city and do some riding. Do you like to ride?" But she's literally like, "Do you like nature? Do you like animals? Good enough for me." Girl, ask more follow-up questions. Literally anything. She's trying to get out of a murder charge with Griff, so fair enough. But then she decides that he's her Prince Charming and she's going to marry him, and he's perfect because he likes a horse named Patchouli. And I did not want this episode to end without that horse was named Patchouli.
I really like that about it.
I love
I
that.
mean, that's kind of checking most of my boxes, except he's a cop, so that would have been the big first red flag, and I would have turned around and walked away. But
And he's a cop who's like weirdly flirting with all of his subordinates. Connie
yeah,
at this
he's
station. There's
fucking Connie.
Oh, for sure. And then that one
Yeah.
day after the one time he says no to Connie is after Elaine has put him under her little spell. And then he's talking to that other police officer and his like former partner or current partner or whatever. And that guy's like, did the captain really say to leave the witches alone, or are you in love with Elaine, whatever her last name is? And the guy's like, Griff is like, "How dare you say that I'm in love?" And he punches him in the face for daring to suggest that he as a man would ever be vulnerable enough to experience the emotion of love.
You're not explaining it right. He punches him in the face in the weirdest way I've ever seen anyone punch anyone in the face before. It's like it comes from like the middle of his chest and he's like, pow. It's so fake looking. It's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah. What were you going to say?
The thing with Griff for me is that they have that whole Renaissance thing where he is so clearly only going along with things because he's under her sex magic spell. Because he's just like, "Oh, this is so lovely. We're out in the woods and they want us to get married and I'll do it." And then they start stripping off his clothes so they can put him in a Renaissance outfit too. And he's completely silent that whole time, essentially, as they just like manhandle him into a tent. But then as they're canoodling post fake wedding, rubbing their noses against each other. And can we talk about that song at some point? Because I would love to talk about that song at some point.
All of the songs are amazing and they're all written by the director.
But there's this long voiceover while they're rubbing noses. And he says, "I'm not in love. It's not that I don't have sentiment. It's just that love is soft. You need guts in this business. I've seen guys get shot to death because they fell in love and got soft inside. I want an heir someday," which, first of all, what is happening here? This whole movie, very Game of Thrones vibes. She is Cersei Lannister. That aside, he says, "I want an heir someday, and I would need to have a wife."
I
but
feel
love
an
is something
AU
else.
fan fiction coming on.
Here's the thing, it would work. Men can get destroyed by things like that. It's like he's not even a man anymore. I never want to get that way. And she says, "When you really love him, it's like fireworks and nothing else matters. You love all the little quirks about him, the way he slurps his cereal, the way his mouth is a little crooked. Those details about him become your whole life. Something inside you opens up like a flower and you realize that you have more love to give than you ever thought was possible, because the more you know him, the more you love him." Cut back to him saying, "The more you get to know a woman, the less you can feel about her. At first, she's this incredible object of mystery who fulfills all your wildest fantasies. Then she starts to reveal little flaws. Then after all, it just gets pretty hard to care. the feminine and
He's
the ideal.
a sociopath. And
Yes.
so is she.
And they say that essentially at one point where he's
Yeah.
like, you murder people. And she's like, yeah, but you're a narcissist.
They are
which
soulmates.
maybe. And then if so, I'm glad it ended the way that it did. But he says essentially, I guess at that point, the thesis statement of the movie, which is that the feminine ideal only exists in a man's mind and no woman could ever actually fulfill it because they're real human people with real human needs. And the counterpoint to that is that the masculine ideal only exists in the female mind, is I guess the counterpoint, and that no man could ever fulfill it because he is a real human being with real human needs and feelings as well, even if that real human need, his deepest need and human feeling is I want a lady who's pretty and does thinking.
So we're just set up to fail. Wow, what a uplifting film.
But it's so, that whole quote is so gross. He's like, sometimes when a woman just loves you more, you feel like it's suffocating and you're drowning in estrogen. But the whole time they're rubbing noses, and then it's just like, anyway, to the rest of the movie, I don't know.
This movie makes you think, and
this movie
every time
exploded my brain.
But like every time, because I've seen this movie at least 4 or 5 times at this point.
Mhm.
And because one, I had to watch it twice for this podcast. But every time I watch it, I like something different in my brain clicks. One, I'm always flavor blasted when I watch it. So I'm like, oh my
Flavor
God.
Blasted.
It's a wild ride. I highly recommend it.
It was very confusing though, because the first time I watched it, I forgot that Trish was dressed up as Elaine when I saw her pick up Richard's portrait, and I thought that it was Elaine. And then I was like very confused. What did I write in my notes? I said I don't know what I thought, but I said, bro, is this her son? And then I said, wait, does that make any sense? And so I'm not really sure what happened there.
If I had watched this high, I would have died because I had a weird thing happen with the sound on my TV that absolutely scared the ever loving shit out of me. Like I was actively scared, and like this isn't a scary movie. It's vibey. There's some blood. We're happy
I was
about
terrified.
that. Okay,
I was terrified the whole time.
Well, it's not that scary though. Like if you're not high, but I started the movie. And the audio was like, I was hearing this voice that was like, wah, 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 wah. And I was like, God, this is going to be fucking weird as hell. And then like I paused it and I accidentally hit the exit button and I played it again. And all of a sudden I hear this like high pitched chipper voice and it's Elaine's voice narrating. And I was like, wait, what? And the whole movie had like been in slow motion when I first started it. And then later on in the movie, the audio unsynced. And so there was the fight scene between Elaine and Trish. And it was just with these weird, like, sounds in the background with no words. And I was like, they're talking to each other. What does this mean artistically? And then I was like, does it mean that the sound is fucked up again? Yes. So I wouldn't have been able to handle that.
The sound is wonky on purpose at so many points in this movie. Nobody could have expected you to not know that wasn't really what was happening, because at the end,
freaky, so it was. I was like, this is correct.
At the end, there are so many moments where it's like almost entirely silent, except for like stab sounds, gasping breaths. You know what I mean? Like there are so many moments where the sound completely drops away.
Well, let's talk about the ending then, because the very end and then right just before that, the bar scene. I think we should talk.
Yeah, we need to talk about the confrontation in the bar, because there is a line in there that changed me fundamentally, maybe. And what we haven't said yet so far actually is that did you guys know that there's a TikTok sound from this movie? When she says,
yes.
I know that you know, because you and I are on the same For You page, and I think it's very cute.
The day he left me is the day that I died. But
yes.
I was reborn to a witch.
Exactly. And that popped off on TikTok maybe a few months ago at this point.
I love that.
And then I heard it in this movie and I was like, what?
Yeah.
But that was not the most iconic line. Actually, the most iconic line comes in the bar scene. Do you know the one
What
I
is
mean?
it?
Does it stand out immediately to you? He's like, I made a couple notes the first time around when I watched it, and that was the only line that I wrote down because it was so insane to me. But he's yelling at her. He's just been sitting there hearing everybody talking about the murder of Lane Peters again. And then Elaine comes in and Griff says, "Sit down, Elaine. Elaine, the DNA come back from the lab. It connects you with Wayne Peters, and Patricia Manning came by the station with some things of yours, including this. She said you drove her husband to suicide." And she goes, "So I was a bad girl. Are you going to punish me?" Just like the way that she goes, "So I was a bad girl." Like, baby, you murdered like 3 guys and one of them killed himself. Like, so I was
She
a bad girl.
She murdered her husband. I would say that she did not murder.
She just
Wayne.
manslaughtered the rest of them.
She manslaughtered him, yeah. And then she for sure murders Griff. So
And here's the thing too, her husband was abusive. So like
good for her.
good for her. I'm gonna give her
So
that
I was
one.
a bad girl.
I'm gonna
Just
start saying that for
insane.
whenever anybody says anything bad. So I was a bad girl. What are you gonna do? Punish me?
Incredible. But that scene just goes off the fucking rails because all of a sudden it turns into like this full bar screaming burn the fucking witch. Like, one, Griff, why would you have this confrontation with a suspect in a public location? You're a terrible cop. You're terrible at this. But like the this article from IndieWire made some fun connections because this movie came out like right after the election
Oh
in
yeah.
2016.
And she said in
And-
an article that like she was not finding many of the reviews favorable at first. And then after
Yeah,
the election, people really, oh, that's what you were going to say. I'm so
Yeah.
cut that out. And then you said, it. I thought you were going to read a quote. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of her saying that. It's okay.
My bad.
But she said in this IndieWire article that basically like people really started seeing allegories to Trump era bullshit in the film and then started liking it a lot more. And so there's the quote she says, hold on, let me see where to start it. They talked about the character and her situation as if it were something current and relevant, which they hadn't done before. They started calling her the love wish, hashtag nasty woman, grab her by the pussy jokes. People became more conscious that this movie's ideas were relevant now, rather than seeing it as some fun little retro thing. And those scenes towards the end at the bar with the near rape and the crowd shouting, "Burn the witch," that all feels pretty Trumpian all of a sudden. And like, yeah. It sure did.
This is not a super relevant question, but I honestly just could not get a grasp on what world we were in. The 60s stuff aside, I was like, okay, is this True Blood? And these are like real witches with real magical powers who have come out of the woodwork to be like, we're here and we're part of society and you guys have to deal with that? Or is this like what we do in the shadows where it's all happening but like most people aren't really aware of it until it kind of crosses their paths? Or is it like the world that we live in reality where some people do practice Wicca, and there are like Wiccan communities and there are people who have covens, but everyone kind of has their own beliefs about whether or not it's real?
I feel like they are all real witches and they all have real power, but they're being led by a bad man who's like corrupting their power and using it to serve himself, so they can't reach their full potential because he's in the mix. And that's why all of her spells aren't working. All of her bottles of piss aren't working.
Her
She
piss
only
bottles.
did the pee with the used tampon in it to bury with Wayne. And honestly, was that they call it a witch bottle when they're investigating the murder, but she just buries it with him so that she says a little bit of her can be with him always.
It's also a witch bottle. It's both.
I'm
A
gonna
special
bury all
one.
the men that I go on one date to the woods with a piss bottle full of
I want you to
tampons and
give
rosemary.
a tampon to everyone. Yeah.
She also like didn't clean up the crime scene at all. Like she left the eggs. She left
she
her
doesn't
blood.
give a fuck. She's like, whatever. Even at the end, he's like, you buried him. And she's like, so what? That's my religion. And you can't burn a woman at the stake for burying a lover according to her religion. And he's like, I'm pretty sure you can go to jail for illegally disposing of a body. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you actually can. But I mean, let's just talk about the very end now, because like I feel like even though there's so much to say about this movie, problematic, not so problematic, very problematic, every scene is a winding road. I thought the ending was just like beautiful, how it all came together, like how she has the vision where she sees Griff like as death, and she realized she's been like painting all of these paintings like her whole life, depicting the scene of a woman like cutting out a man's heart, and then she's like, oh wait, that's now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really interesting too, how it's like they already had the whole you're immune to love fight conversation, blah, blah, blah. But even then, she kind of does get him back under her spell a little bit after they escape the bar scene together. And she does her whole thing that she does to all of the boys of being like, poor baby, poor baby. But part of her magic that I think we have not really acknowledged much is that she's giving them, I don't know if it's witch bottles or whatever, but she gives them something to drink. Like we see Wayne has the flask, but also Richard is drinking the wine that she gives him. She tries to push like the tea and cakes pretty hard on Trish at one point. She gives Griff at the end something to drink, and he looks at it and like kind of looks at her and then pours it on the floor. And that's when she really like recoils and is like, oh, now this is a problem.
Well, that was also part of the vision that led her to realize like what she needed to do, because that had been depicted.
Goblet.
Yeah, the drop goblet had been depicted. But yeah, I just loved, it's so fucked up, but I love that like she saw all of those I've said this already, but she saw all those lovers saying what she wanted them to say, and they're all dead, and she was like, oh, if I'll get Griff to say what I want him to say, because the fantasies I have of these men are exactly what I want. So if I kill him, then it's just my fantasy that's left, and I can live
Which
in
is
that.
all she
And
wants,
that's what and that's what she does. She fucking kills him, and then she sees in her mind's eye her perfect prince, and then she has her real perfect Renaissance wedding, which will be my wedding one day, and she goes on a unicorn, and she's very happy.
He says, I love you, Elaine. I've never loved anyone but you. I want to marry you. And she's like,
Thanks, Bess.
And you see musicians playing and no music at that point. That scene where they were fighting, but there were no words, really could have been real. No way to know.
Yeah.
Except
I know. I freaked out at that point too, because I was like, fuck, my sound got fucked up again. I literally paused it, exited it out, but it was so close to the end that it restarted the whole movie and I had to fast forward. Anyway, you know, curse you, Amazon Prime. But yeah, that's the Love Witch.
I mean, I don't think we could have done any better of a job discussing it than we did.
No,
frankly,
it's literally
so much,
so convoluted.
It's so all over. Every scene is like so dense. It feels so long. It felt like I was watching a 15-hour prestige drama because there's so much packed into every scene, even when the dialogue is like very, I think, purposefully overwritten and delivered in that like sort of stilted way a lot of the time. Like it's dense. It's a dense 2-hour long movie.
Super dense, and it took me like 3.5 hours to watch. But it was great in its own way. How could it be gayer? I mean, we talked about it already. The movie could have been over in the first scene if Trish and Elaine had just gotten together. And then it could have just had joy.
It could be not transphobic for one.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be, I think, baseline for how it could be gayer.
Yes.
But also the part where Trish dresses up in Elaine's wig and makeup and underwear and clothing. That's very gay, and it's very The Roommate.
Yes. They should have fucked with her dressed like that. Anyway, that's something for later. Moving on.
Honestly, fucking her husband is pretty gay, and the whole thing. That's okay.
Yeah.
These are the same dialogues we've been having about Jackie and Shauna on Yellow Jackets. Which is that to fuck your bestie's man is to fuck your bestie, frankly. And consider that. So
just sit on that for a while.
You want to be her, you want to be with her, and that's gay.
You want to be with her, you want to be in her.
They want to be each other. That's so gay.
They just want to fuse into one. Yeah, it's gay as fuck. It's canon. It's canon. Okay. Where would Matthew Lillard fit into this? For me, I can't have him in this movie because it would ruin it. Not that he would make it worse, but like if I had anyone I recognized in this film, it would have like taken me out of it and taken me out of the fact that I fully thought it was released in 1960.
Okay, but he would make a great Richard or Jerry.
Yeah, but Jerry's got Shaggy's hair. So that's kind of just like a natural thing right there.
Like I would have liked to have seen him in the Jerry, just the flashbacks of just Jerry smiling and Jerry like laying on the floor.
Do we ever see the dad? He could do the voice of the dad, and then it wouldn't be so illusion breaking.
I would recognize his voice. That might have been worse. That might have been worse actually if I like just hear like Matthew.
God, is that you?
Matthew?
I think he could have been one of the coven members who we don't see very well, maybe. Or he could have just
coven member.
Yeah, one of the coven. Don't say that about Maddie Lily.
Don't
without
say
his
that
consent.
about Maddie Lily.
But he could be a coven member portrayed in one of the paintings in Elaine/Barb's home. Maybe.
Okay. Very layers and layers.
Yeah.
Egg of Matthew Lillard.
He could have been the mime. He could have been the mime, and then he'd be under the mime makeup.
Yes.
That's the one.
That's where he is. He is the mime. He is the mime that he will be the officiant at my wedding as the mime. Anyway. And then who's the dumb bitch? I mean, they're all the dumb bitch. There's so many people who are dumb in this in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I don't think I can nail one down for this for me.
Who's the coven leader? What's his name?
Gahan. He's the biggest bitch.
I hate him.
I'll give it to him, frankly, because I'm too conflicted to give it to anybody else.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, then that brings us to our knives out of 5s. I'm interested to see how we're going to rate this one. What did the people think, Chelsea?
The people on IMDb gave this movie a 6.2 out of 10. And then even though Anna Biller said she had a lot of haters, critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave this 95% fresh, which I think is one of the highest that we've seen from critics.
I saw that. That was crazy to me.
Yeah. And then audiences didn't necessarily get it the same way that critics do. And they gave it 60%, which is still fresh, but is 35% lower. And frankly, in terms of my feelings, I don't have any idea how I feel about this movie. Like, even the first time I watched it, before I went down any rabbit holes about anything, the first note that I wrote was, I'm terrified to discuss this movie because it is the horniest thing I've ever seen, but it is also Gone Girl. Because the whole thesis statement is the cool girl monologue in Gone Girl, which is like, I pretended to be this ideal for him because he was supposed to pretend to be this ideal. Now he doesn't want to hold up his end of the bargain, but he's chipped away at my soul this whole time I had to pretend. That's murder. So guess what? I'm framing you for murder. So sorry if anybody hasn't seen Gone Girl, but it's been years. But yeah, I my notes were essentially like, I don't know if I'm scared because this is a horror movie, or if I'm scared because, like, and I'm going to say this, and I don't want further comment. It's not for discussion. This is just in some ways a queer podcast. This is part of my queer experience. Am I scared because this is a horror movie, or am I scared because I'm maybe asexual? And there was just so much happening that was so overwhelming to me in a million different ways, even before I got into the even more overwhelming parts.
Yeah.
That I had to come up with a list of cultural touchstones that I would like to share before we wrap up. And my cultural touchstones were Gone Girl, that episode of CSI where Milo Ventimiglia does Jimson weed and then kills his friend.
Oh,
True
fuck.
Blood, Bedazzled, The Roommate, Midsummer, obviously, Jennifer's Body, obviously, The Blood Spattered Bride, obviously,
Yes.
which we haven't even
There's
discussed
even the
at all.
rings part at the end.
rings,
She's wearing the colorful rings.
The heart.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then that episode of Hawkeye where they do the Renaissance Fair. Those were my cultural touchstones, where I was just like reaching around me for something familiar to
Something
help
to
me
hold
ground
on to.
myself. Yeah.
Well, do you know what you want to?
No.
Like
No.
she
I
abstains.
have no idea. I
Chelsea's
might
like,
abstain.
I can't touch this.
I texted
I mean,
Sydney.
it's so hard.
I texted Sydney and I was like, the idea, the first time I watched this, even again, before I went down the rabbit hole, and I said, the idea that I need to discuss this movie publicly on the record before I have an emergency 30 hours of therapy to process this is like untenable to me. And I think I've done my best to power through.
You did a great
but
job.
I don't know that I can go any further.
No, I understand that. I mean, I feel you. I feel like I would give this like 2 different ratings based on like if you muted it and if you unmuted it. You know what I mean?
It's gorgeous. I think it's an incredibly well put together piece of art.
Yeah, like I am blown away by the attention to detail. I'm really moved by like when people put they really throw their fucking back into it. You know, like this director, she had a vision. She spent 7 fucking years on this movie, 7.5 or something like that. Filmed it on 35 millimeter. I mean, it's just like, it is a feat of cinematography to behold that like they made this movie so believably like born out of the 1960s and it came out in fucking 2016. I'm not over that, and I've seen the movie now. I'm not over it. And the costume design, I want to buy all of the things. I'm looking for that red dress. Like, look at me right now. I'm wearing the wig. I'm going to wear this blue eyeshadow every day of my life for the rest of my life. And it'll stain my eyelids blue and it'll be worth it. But like, you unmute the movie and you hear the awesome songs, the original songs that she wrote for the movie, also incredible, but it's just, the message is so all over the place, and it made me feel super icky a lot of the time. After this conversation, I feel a little ickier, especially with all of the transphobia that now seems so blatant after we've talked about this. And that I feel like the moments when she starts like saying her thoughts about her version of feminism or whatever it may be, luckily aren't constant throughout the film. So I would feel super shitty, and then there'd be like 45 minutes of magical Renaissance fair. And so I sort of forgot, you
Then they'd be
know.
like, "Here's Patchouli the horse," and you'd be like, "Patchouli the horse."
Patchouli! I was like, wow, a Renaissance fair at all in this film. Like, I didn't think I could love it aesthetically anymore, but I have a huge thing for the Renaissance fair. So I don't know if I could parse out the politics a little bit better, I would give this a higher score. I would give it a 5 for like the way that it is put together physically. But like because of that, it's like docking me down to like a 3.8 for me, maybe a 4. I don't know. It's hard. It's just so hard. I still can't really put my finger on the message,
Yeah.
but I don't like it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I think about that Medium article, who was I want to say the author's name, but they just call themselves Sam B. But I'll link it in the references. But their perspective of like, I love this movie and I see myself in it and I think it's great art and I just think it's a shame that the movie doesn't see itself in me. To me, I think that is a wonderful statement. But then also there was that other article where they were just like, this is bad and it's harmful and can we stop doing it? And it's like, okay, that leaves me kind of conflicted.
Yeah.
I think both of those statements can like live in the same.
For sure.
thing.
Yeah.
For sure. And nobody's a
Like-
monolith and everyone has like there's no group where everyone is gonna all say the same thing or feel the same way. So
Yeah.
I love this movie. I think I honestly I take this movie at like face value and just like have a fun time watching like a weird movie, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And so I always it's a 4 out of 5 for me. Like this movie, it's weird, but every once in a while I just get the thing where I'm like, I'm gonna get high and watch this weird movie in my house and just like aesthetically enjoy it and not like read too deep into it and just be like, this is a weird movie. And I think if you're not looking for, be like, what is the deep meaning of this movie, it's so much more enjoyable.
Totally. When I was watching it last night, I was like, yay, because I was just kind of in an okay mood, and I wanted to have a good time. And then I was reading about it and I was really thinking about it and I was like, yeah. I was like, oh no. So no thoughts, just vibes. I would give it a 4 out of 4.
This is a no thoughts, just vibes movie.
Did you come to a conclusion on your score, Chelsea?
I don't know. I wish I could be no thoughts, just vibes, but I have 1 billion thoughts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I it's such an incredibly well put together film. If I am allowed to death of the author it, I can find meaning in it, which is essentially that toxic masculinity and very strict heteropatriarchy harms everybody involved. Nobody comes out of this in a good light. Nobody comes out of it feeling good. Elaine has like this sort of moment of victory at the end, but it's not rooted in reality or in her current situation or anything like that. And so like in that sense, if I just take the text, I don't disagree with what I decide that it's saying, and I don't disagree with what I want it to be saying. But I don't know.
You don't have to rate it. It's fine.
Know. That said,
we'll just put abstained on Letterboxd.
Yeah, there's so much going on here. And I will say the Jimson Weed sequence terrifying. Terrifying for me. One of the horror movies that I was genuinely scared while watching. So, that's not nothing.
There you go. It got Chelsea. It got Chelsea.
Scared me.
It got her.
She's too scared.
Oh man, and that's The Love Witch. What a doozy. I'd watch it again though. Sydney, next time you're in town, let's get flavor blasted and let's dress up like
in our
this.
Ren Fair outfit.
Yes, that'd be better. It would be more comfortable for me to watch the film not in a wig because this shit's itchy. Oh my god. But yeah, next week we're doing something really fun. Who wants to introduce that one?
I'll introduce it, which is just to say that it's another Thinky, I think. I don't think any of us, Monica, have you seen it?
Monica's
Okay.
seen it.
Monica's seen it. But we are joined by a special guest next week. If you'll remember from our My Bloody Valentine episode, I mentioned the words Entertainment Weekly, and then I said that's an Easter egg for later.
Easter egg reveal now.
Easter egg revealed. But next week we are joined by our friend Chancellor Agard, because we are doing the new Candyman. We kind of have we kind of have a standing policy of asking our friends who will maybe be on the pod, like, what movie would you want to do, and coming up with just like a list so that when a movie comes up, we can tap our special guests. And Chance is a real actual media critic for Entertainment Weekly. He is smart and knows things and does that professionally.
He's also very good at cooking.
He's incredible at cooking, and he loves suits. Yeah, those are just Easter eggs
he
for the
better
Easter
wear
eggs.
a suit.
Maybe we're recording on Valentine's Day. It would be very romantic.
He is our Valentine's Day.
He's our Valentine's. And this is gonna be so long after Valentine's Day, but it's fine. But he asked if he could do the original Candyman, and then we had to be like, oh no, sorry, bestie, we already did it. But
it would have been like such a better episode if he had been on it, because like but like this is gonna be fucking good too, because I really liked this movie. I'm excited for you guys to see it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I love the original Candyman. We all loved the original Candyman.
I love the original
very
Candyman.
different vibes.
And we had kind of similar discussions where we were like, is this movie achieving what it wants, but is it good anyway? And so I'm really curious to see the new one, especially when it put the power of storytelling like back in the hands of the people who the stories are about. So I'll be very curious to watch it. And I'll be very curious to discuss with a real bona fide smarty.
Yeah, it's gonna be really fun. And so, it's still love season. And why not show us some love still, I gave you a smooch at the beginning of this episode. Why not give us a smooch in the form of a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or Spotify? It just seems like the nice thing to do, very giving. It's not the season of giving, but we could still say that. And also, why not follow us on social media at spooky_Tuesday? That's Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, something else. We're also on YouTube. If you just search Spooky Tuesday podcast, we should come up, hopefully. And we're on Letterboxd at Spooky Tuesday, and we're on Facebook and Tumblr at Spooky Tuesday Pod. So we got a lot of options there. So much content. Goodbye.
No, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. I hope you're doing okay after the big thoughts we thoughts today. I'm obviously not. I'm going to turn it all off.
Time for brain break.
Bye, spookies.
So I was a bad girl. Are you going to punish me?
Spooky Tuesday was created by Monica Haidt, Sydney Thompson, and Chelsea Duff, and edited by Sydney Thompson. Our gorgeously spooky tunes are all thanks to Tamra Simons, who you can follow on Instagram at Captain Tamra, and our podcast art is by Mary Murphy, who you can find on Instagram at the_moon_OMG.